It's the name. So the old timers in the crowd will know a lot of history, probably close to 100% of which is absolutely irrelevant at this point. The company's doing a lot of really cool things right now. So, Brent, come on up and tell us what's going on. Brent Schroeder.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming over lunchtime, or the beginning of lunchtime. The schedule's a little ambiguous of when we're supposed to eat and where we're supposed to eat, but hopefully we'll make this a very worthwhile session and can get you on to lunch right after this. I'm really excited to be here talking about this particular topic because of the many topics that I talk about with customers. This one I think is the most engaging from an enabling what customers are trying to do and ultimately what people want to do. So I'm really excited to be presenting it and talking to you about it. Before I dig into the details, one thing I wanted to do is get a little bit of a feel from those that are here on your roles. How many people are from the application development community? Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. How about the opposite side of the world, the IT operations? A couple. And then the business stakeholders that rely on both of these teams or organizations to deliver for you, the IT executive or the business executives and business stakeholders. Very good. Each of you in your role going to have a different perspective on the goals and challenges that you're trying to accomplish on your journey to digital transformation. And it's important, that we understand the challenges and the dynamics and how your roles and perspectives play into it. And so as I go through this presentation today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time up front really talking about what I see as the challenges as we adopt an edge to core to cloud computing, and the philosophies or the tenets to apply. No matter which products you're choosing, whether it's some from SUSE or from other vendors, these tenets need to be consistent, because if they're not, that's where the challenges are going to run into and mount even further. So in the digital transformation, each of you is on your journey. You're climbing your own mountain, identifying what you want to accomplish and what you want to be. How do you delight your customers more than ever? How do you disrupt your competitors or prepare yourselves for a transition, a leapfrog in your individual industries? Or maybe lesser ambitious, how do you keep from being disrupted? And if you're not thinking about one of those avenues and just kind of in your own little cocoon, then you will be disrupted, because industry's changing very fast and the technology and how people apply it is evolving very quickly. And so you need to be prepared for that and understand that. The technology advances that we have, machine learning and analytics and robotics and IoT are as exciting as ever, and enabling companies to do potentially fantastic things. But as I go out and talk to customers, I also hear the challenges. The deployment models. Things are supposed to be getting simpler. We probably have more deployment models now than at any time in our history. Cloud, edge, core, mobile, supercomputers, mainframes, power systems, etc. that really crank up the challenges. And then the configuration volatility and the sprawl. We think containers are absolutely fantastic, faster, more agile. Yet for those that lived through the initial introduction of virtual machines and the whole notion of virtual sprawl, virtual machine sprawl, Containers are promising to be 10 or 100 times more disruptive to how we manage our infrastructure. The next being data. The massive amounts of data that we're inundated. You know, the dream is if only I had access to all the data I need to make decisions. Turns into the reality of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all this data? How do I manage it? How do I sort out the irrelevant data from the critical data that I need to make my decisions? And then the ever-growing and never-solved security challenges. As I was working on this deck, and you know, I always have a deck that says security challenges. And one of my reviewers said, haven't we solved that? Isn't that old news? And security will never be old, so you can never take it for granted. In this new digital transformation, for example, containers. You know, where did my container come from? Do I understand the chain of custody of its history? Who introduced it? How's it been changed? How's it been altered? What containers am I consuming from in a microservices architecture? Who am I sharing from? And how do I trust that? In an IoT realm, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of devices possibly on your network, streaming in data, and you're confident that not one of them has been compromised. So the challenges are there, keeping us from climbing that mountain. But there's also light at the end of the tunnel, promise on the horizon. And so if we think about the positive side, what can we do with this? What if? What if my developers didn't have to worry about infrastructure and policy and could just focus on the applications and the capabilities that they were delivering? What if my IT operations teams could focus on new deployment strategies, ensuring that that edge is secure, reaching customers in new ways and through vehicles that we haven't reached them before, and not have to deal with provisioning, lifecycle management? The business stakeholders having up-to-the-minute insight into how the business or products are performing to ensure that they're meeting the customer expectations. And all along, what we're all after is that those user interactions, that our users have access to the information, real-time information of what's pertinent to them based on their history, what they're doing, what they want to do, and ultimately yielding higher customer satisfaction. So the bottom line, is to desire to increase agility and velocity, not hinder it. To be able to deliver new capabilities and ensure that it's secure in how we're doing that. And really, there's no magic bullet, magic wand to wave to make this all real easy. And if somebody's telling you that there is, then you're listening to the wrong people. It's going to be a journey, it's going to be a challenge, and what we have to do is know what's our foundation today that we're starting with, and what's the vision, where are we trying to go? And I use this, and kind of built this as kind of our internal view of what's our vision for how customers, the industry, need to evolve to address these challenges. And really, it's about enabling businesses to innovate and execute on your digital solution, your journey. When, where, and how in support of your customers. Because that's really what it boils down to is, what do my customers need? Where are they? When do they need it? And how do I deliver it to them? So with that kind of as the foundation, let's look at what that means and what the kind of closer to the implementation. We hear about these, you read about trends. It's often a balance, when I read articles from the analysts and the experts. If you listen too closely, you would think not a data center exists on the planet any longer, that everything's in the cloud. Or if you read another one and another author's projection, the clouds are draining and it's all going to IoT. That's where all the devices, all the things, information is going to happen. And the reality is that all of these paradigms are going to exist. And they're going to exist, need to exist in concert with each other. They will all be here when all of us are retired. And so what we've got to do is address the challenges. If they're silos, we can't achieve some of those objectives, some of those what-ifs. I want to deploy in the cloud and take advantage of the services and agility that the cloud brings from rapid scalability. And yet the data that application needs is anchored in the core. But it's in the core for a good reason. So it's not like I can just take that and move it to the cloud or move it back, because guarantee the cloud makes money in one way or another, and it's the egress. It's all free coming in. I'll just get you when you want to bring it back out. So we got to balance these challenges and figure out how do we get these to work in concert with each other, so that where one begins and another one, or one ends and another one begins, is much more transparent. That I can move across these boundaries, or I can put the functionality where I need to and leverage the capability of the adjacents. So how I envision this and how we're working across the industry to solve this really boils down to two planes: software-defined infrastructure and an application delivery platform. Let me talk a little bit about some of the tenets, because this is where I was saying that if these tenets aren't adhered to, it doesn't matter which products you buy, which vendor you team up with, the challenges, the barriers are going to be there. If I start with the software-defined infrastructure, because you need a solid foundation. If you build on a weak foundation or incomplete foundation, then the top will crumble. First and foremost is, do you have a consistent platform from edge to core to cloud? And what I mean by that, by a consistent platform, is whether you're using containers, virtual machine, bare metal, because they all exist in all places. Can I write an application one time and deploy it to any of those? And can I manage it from wherever I am? I need that consistency from the edge to the core to the cloud. And an enterprise resiliency and scale in all locations. And let me explain what I mean by that. What may be attractive is, hey, it's just an IoT device. I'll just get myself some free software to put out at the edge. But resiliency is important no matter where it is in an enterprise application. When you're using your mobile app for that banking application and you do a deposit, do you want to trust that that's secure? When you're driving an autonomous vehicle and a child's ball rolls into the street, do you want the operating system to crash? Of course not. You want enterprise capabilities wherever you are, the resiliency and scale to be able to grow up. And then a deployment and lifecycle governance. And that journey, the what if for the IT operations, to make it easier. I need to be able to understand my compliance, my security, and be able to roll out and govern my applications regardless of their location. So those are the tenets of the software-defined infrastructure. Now onto the application delivery platform. Some are the same or related, but different. First is that one application paradigm is not going to fit all applications. If you're saying, man, I got to move to containers, I'm going to put everything in containers. No, you're not. There's no reason to. They don't fit all applications. So, regardless, I want an environment, an application delivery platform that understands bare metal, that understands virtual machines, that understands containers, and whatever the next one is, serverless, and beyond. And I want tool choices for my developers that fit those business requirements. So that if I want to use Go for a machine learning application and Java for a business application, I can make those choices, but I get one environment to work within, one source control place to put things, one deployment vehicle to deploy them. It gets consistency. It's easier to learn. It's easier to have developers move around. It's easier to leverage. And then finally, centrally managed edge to core to cloud. I don't want to have to use one application deployment and governance vehicle for cloud applications and another one for on-prem applications. I want to use one catalog, one vehicle for deployment, one vehicle for governance to understand who's deployed where, to manage the identity of who's allowed to access across the spectrum. So those are the tenets that we need to adhere to. Okay, so how do we accomplish that? This is where the open source ecosystem comes into play. Open source has been around now for over 25 years. When Linux first came on, when SUSE first came into prominence as one of the original commercial enterprise distribution of Linux. And over the years it's evolved and the communities have grown to essentially millions of projects now in GitHub, all open sourced. And the technology's matured, whether it's private cloud, whether it's now the new and latest innovations in the cloud, in the application platform realm. The majority of the innovations are coming from open source. So let's look at some of those major initiatives and how they fit those tenets that we were just talking about. We'll start again with the software-defined infrastructure. At the compute layer, Linux, containers, provide that platform that meets that first criteria. Linux is really now the de facto platform in almost all environments. Whether I'm running in the very smallest of devices out at the edge, whether I'm running in a supercomputer, in a data center, or running on a cloud. Over 60% of the workloads deployed in clouds are running on Linux. So that gives you that platform, edge to core to cloud. Storage, along the realm of big proprietary vendors. And we're seeing the rapid movement and evolution of Ceph in the open source community as an emerging software-defined storage solution. Just this week, or last week, I guess it is now, given it's Monday, Ceph Foundation was newly formed in the Linux Foundation. to give it additional focus, additional governance, additional funding, to really kind of take it to that next level. And it also spans from core to cloud and conceptually moving to the edge. Not a commercial deployment that's really there on a full-scale edge deployment, but you can see there's work in progress to take it there. So as we think about the future and investing in the future and an architecture and a product that will kind of sustain through this journey, Ceph is a great candidate. And then in the networking space, a lot of new work going on in various varieties in the Linux Foundation networking organization. As important to the software-defined infrastructure is the management. And there's numerous projects out there, from Spacewalk, Salt, Ansible for automation, Manaska for monitoring, that allow you to manage infrastructure regardless of where it's located. Numerous instances, numerous locations across cloud implementations or on-prem. So those are really the software-defined elements. And the management initiatives. And finally, the private cloud. And OpenStack as a private cloud vehicle for those that want to go full on in the private cloud in implementation. I've followed this virtualization, software-defined infrastructure, private cloud movement now for 15 plus years. And not everybody needs a private cloud. Software-defined infrastructure and a edge to core to cloud management ecosystem may be sufficient for many. But there are those that want the multi-region capabilities, the full infrastructure transparency, the identity management, the governance that comes and multi-tenancy that can come with a private cloud implementation. And OpenStack is really gaining momentum in the last few years from its auspicious beginnings and challenges that it had earlier on. So that's kind of the software-defined infrastructure projects. Now let's talk a little bit about application delivery. And it really all started with containers and Docker. And introducing this whole new wave, actually using a technology that was 20 years old from a container standpoint for those of us that go way back before and into the mini computer and mainframe realm. The whole notion of containers is nothing new. What's new and what open source did is, how do I take advantage of them? How do I use them? In the Linux realm and in kind of the newer computing realm, containers were largely unmanageable at scale. So Docker started to bring that into a usability that hadn't been achieved before in this space. And then to take that up from a deployment and scalability standpoint was Kubernetes. The Google project that was open sourced, arguably the fastest growing, fastest to traction open source project in history. Now bringing better manageability as you start to deploy them, want to put them into a production environment. However, in reality, containers and Kubernetes, etc., is still about the infrastructure. Closer to the developers, developer-friendly, but it's still about the infrastructure, deployment of that infrastructure, configuration of that infrastructure. So where does the developer enter? Who's helping the developer? This is where the PaaS domain comes into play. And in the open source community, the PaaS environment that's really getting broad adoption and acceptance with multiple vendors jumping on with consistent distributions is that of Cloud Foundry. Providing the ability to use virtually any development language, multiple CI/CD integrations, and deploy to wherever you want to deploy. With some of its latest sub-projects, Stratus being one that comes to mind, the ability to have a central console to manage multiple Cloud Foundries, regardless of location. So if I've got a Cloud Foundry deployment running in a cloud, and a Cloud Foundry deployment on-prem, I can have a single layer of visibility and governance over those. So you can see that from edge to core to cloud, the open source community is kind of rallying around what are those key tenets, what are the needs, how do we achieve the what if? Now the challenge with open source, as much as we all love it, is it moves fast. The projects move independently. Some compatible, some not so compatible when a transition occurs. So how do you as an enterprise that wants to deploy this and want to focus on the business and not the communities, how do you get a handle on that? Well, it's with the likes of engaging a strategic partner in your open source journey. And SUSE is really kind of focused on that, and for those that know SUSE from many years ago as a Linux vendor, like I said earlier, 25 plus years of an enterprise Linux portfolio. But in realizing the transition that enterprises were going through and the expansion of open source, we too have expanded our portfolio. So today we've got a full portfolio spanning software-defined infrastructure and application delivery. A Linux distribution that's really based on this notion of a multimodal operating system. And what do I mean by that? Multimodal. We are probably one of the only, if not the only, distribution that has one source code base that allows you to build an application or the infrastructure targeted at the environment you want to deploy on, optimized to that environment. So if you want to run on a Raspberry Pi at the far edge and deploy 10,000 of them, or in the data center on an HPC supercomputer, or in the cloud on a cluster to run an SAP application, it's all the same source code. And we have a software-defined storage solution that goes along with that, called SES. And again, supportable on-prem or in the cloud, to give you that flexibility to deploy where you want. And a single interface or a single access point, storage point, for block, file, or object. So you don't have to have different technologies underlying each one of these. And to take that even further, with an S3 interface, to compatibility with your cloud storage. And in the networking space, we support numerous open source initiatives, as well as a couple of proprietary implementations of software-defined network to complete out that software-defined layer. Looking at the management realm, SUSE Manager has capabilities to manage that infrastructure, deploy the operating system regardless of where you want to deploy it from a single instance, from a central point, deploy to the edge, deploy to a Raspberry Pi, deploy to the data center, deploy to Azure, and keep an inventory of all of that and understand what version everybody's on, the compliance of that, are the configurations drifting? Configuration drift, a great opportunity for somebody to slip in and create a security hole, a security entrance point. So understanding your compliance across your ecosystem, and if and when an issue arises, a patch, a specter, a meltdown, being able to rapidly identify all the infrastructure that's exposed to it, the infrastructure that's not exposed to it, and just updating the infrastructure that's necessary. And then to the private cloud, the SUSE OpenStack solution that enables you to bring that private cloud capability across all your ecosystem from an on-prem standpoint and then interact with the public cloud. So that's our software-defined infrastructure solutions. And then in application delivery, now having entered in both containers, Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, and all building upon each other. We have a container as a service solution that packages the operating system, the container environment, and Kubernetes as the management ecosystem for that container to give you that platform. And that platform, common theme, can be deployed on-prem or in the cloud. And then, kind of a first in the industry, was we took Cloud Foundry and said, you know what, this is all about agility and speed and containers. Why isn't Cloud Foundry built on those same principles? So we containerized Cloud Foundry and run Cloud Foundry on top of our container platform. Gives us a lighter deployment, easier to manage, faster to start up. One other thing that gives us is portability. So you can deploy SUSE Cloud Application Platform both on-prem on SUSE containers, as well as in the cloud on Azure Container Services or Amazon Container Services, and get that one application delivery platform regardless of where you want to deploy and build your applications, and manage them, those instances, centrally. So this is kind of the new evolving SUSE and the breadth of our portfolio and the focus on enabling edge to core to cloud. That consistent platform at both tiers, whether you're at the software-defined infrastructure layer or at the application delivery layer, being able to provide you that enterprise class solution with the services that go along with that to support, consult, architect as you need. So how do we wrap up? We talked about the challenges of adopting the new technologies, of your digital transformation. How do you manage all the new deployment models, all the instances, traditional implementations, and new cloud-native implementations? And I hope what you see from this is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are answers to those challenges to be able to scale across that infrastructure and those ecosystems, to increase agility, to deliver customer engagement models that you've never delivered before, on platforms that you've not used before, and deliver those faster with more efficiency than you've ever done before. So I ask you in closing, how will you realize your digital transformation? And do you have the right partners in your strategic circle to help you build and deliver and achieve the summit of what you're after? So with that, I thank you for coming today. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to take those. If you've got detailed questions about the product and portfolio, we have a booth on the expo floor in the foyer, and so I'd encourage you to go visit with them and find out more and all about the rest of the portfolio. Thank you very much.
We do have time for a question or two if there are some. I guess you must have been comprehensive.
Nailed it.
The future looks great for SUSE, so anyone that does have questions, please feel free to talk to Brent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll resume at the top of the hour.